Everyone, so this is just going to be a video going over some of the conventions and guidelines of project number 2. Project number 2 is essentially going to be a point-by-point comparative rhetorical analysis. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what that means. You will also see kind of a little bit more in depth what that means in the project guidelines that you can find on Blackboard. So if you go to Blackboard and you click on Lessons Projects, and then project and presentation information, what you will find is that there is some information on Project 2, including the rubric, a template to fill out, the pre-writing if you wanted to go ahead and maybe look at that. And if I were to tell you just a few conventions of the assignment that you should really keep in mind at the beginning, it would be that for this assignment, it's really important what kind of sources you use. So you're thinking about the most recent relevant sources possible on a topic of your interest, okay? So make sure that it's a topic that's actually of interest to you, right? Again, as I've said before, because that will make this process so much more engaging and the audience is more likely to even believe, right, the points you're making about a topic if you're emotionally invested in it, right? We should be able to understand the so what, who cares from the start of the assignment for Project 2, meaning we should understand, well, why, right? Why do multiple areas of study write about and research this topic? So essentially, some criteria, again, to keep in mind would be you will need 2 articles from the library databases, and you will want to make sure that those 2 articles are from different areas of study. Now, of course, the topic itself should be of interest to you, and I would say at least one of the areas of study, if not both, should also be of interest to you. So for instance, if you're looking even at that guideline sheet that I made for you, you will see that there are some examples that work and don't work. If you look down and kind of see all the different information that I've put, for instance, underneath each section, you will see kind of what the expectation is that works in that section of the essay. Okay, so when you're looking at those guidelines for printing, hopefully you'll see a little bit more so what I mean. But essentially, this assignment that is a minimum of 1,200 words, right? And I like to emphasize again, this time we're using headings, right? We're using subheadings because that's a genre that pretty much every, well, not every, but many, right, if not most, fields of study honor. So the sciences, medical fields, so on and so forth, they will honor using subheadings because, of course, those kind of serve a really important organizational purpose. We didn't use them in Project 1, but in this project, we want to kind of think about, well, how, right? Can these subheadings help direct me and promote my success because she's told me underneath each one what it is she wants me to explore. But at the same time, make sure that you see it as a chance to really take some stress off of you, right? Because I'm not asking you to imagine what you should do in the introduction, imagine what you should do in the structure section. I've told you. Okay, but I did give you some examples that would work. That was something that I almost went into before. There are an example, for instance, an essay that engages with the topic of obesity and one that's on increasing taxes on the wealthy would fail, right? Automatically, only because it didn't follow directions. So both articles that you pick need to be on the same issue. Okay, from different fields of study. And I did want to say that it's more than welcome to include, right, different subdisciplines. So if you're really interested in, I don't know, microbiology in some other form, right, or maybe just biology, you could, of course, do both of those fields. You could do 2 sciences, 2 more liberal arts-oriented fields of study. It's completely up to you. A question that I get often that I think is a really good question is just how do I know, right, where the database reveals what area of study I'm working with. Now, of course, you can always ask a librarian because they'll know for sure, but it will be typically indicative of the field of study, whatever the title of the journal is, right? Also, if you click the details about the articles, then usually they'll have the field of study. But if you can't find it, and if the journal name is kind of strange and not really to the point. So for instance, I know that, let's see, JSTOR, for instance, that takes more of a historical approach a lot of the times, but it's not called, right, historical context journal or something of that nature. So you might have to Google, in that case, the actual journal itself. Okay. For this assignment, the goal is to not engage with what the arguments are at hand between the two articles. Okay, so you want them to be published within the last 3 years on the same topic from different areas of study. What you are focusing on instead is how the structure, language, and reference style relate to one another. So I did want to make sure that I made that as clear as I possibly can. So throughout the paper, which should be organized around 3 areas of convention, again, structure, language, and reference style, you will compare and contrast your 2 articles with findings and specific examples from your 2 sources. So, if you're looking at the introduction for this assignment does operate in a way that is very similar, I would say, to other assignments we've done in here. You know, you should have a hook that engages the audience, essential background information to help the readers to kind of understand, right, what it is you plan to explore, as well as your topic. And then you should have, let's see, 1 or 2 paragraphs in your structure section. Okay, so your second section, which should be titled number 2, structure. This is where you're going to answer just a few of these questions. Now, you probably in the structure section, I say a few, you won't have the space or the chance rather to answer all of these questions because there's quite a few, but I kept it broad for a reason. Okay, so for instance, you might look at, does the article present a main idea and details? Is it a cause and then an effect of an issue? What about different points of view regarding an issue or topic? You might look at, does the text have a thesis statement, right, versus a hypothesis, or does it focus on theory or experiments? Data is something that students often like to look at in the structure section, so just a comparison contrast of the 2 articles and their usage of data. So thinking about, well, is the data quantitative, which we know is more numerical, based in value, or is it qualitative, which might be told by way of interviews and dialogue, and probably would be, you know, less number focused and more focused on people's emotions, right? What does the data show it brought people to feel? Are there visual images? So of course you could compare and contrast visual imagery within each article. And you might think about too, what type of title does it have, right? Each one, because titles, I always say, let's not forget, certainly those are an author's first impression on an audience. And whatever the title is, it's like you can bet to believe it's going to be strategic, right? So it will be indicative of that field of study, whatever the title is. You know, you might learn really a bigger implication about that field of study. Now, at the end of each paragraph for all your body paragraphs, you need to be sure that you end by exploring the implications of the differences and similarities, right? So the whole time throughout the paper, you should be creating a similarity difference relationship. It could be that the texts are very similar in structure, language, and reference style, which is fine. It could be that they're different in some ways, meaning the structure is similar between the two, but the language is really different and the reference style, okay? But in the thesis, which is something else I wanted to say, you should have a one-sentence thesis that comes at the end of the introduction, and you should make sure that it makes clear what your 3 points are, right? And they have to be in some way related to structure, language, and reference style. I do advise looking at sample essays, which are a bit short just because our criteria is longer now, right? 1,200 words. And of course, I can't alter samples, so always remember that. They're not my property, so I can't alter them. But I do recommend looking at those and just seeing what an excellent job students have done, right? And how creative they've been with this project in the past and how they've kind of come to grander conclusions, right, about these choices, because you can really learn a lot about a field of study and what characterizes that field of study based on what type of language they use and what type of visual imagery, right, and reference style, because reference style is strategic. It has a strategy behind it. For instance, in APA style, which is not what my field as an English professor uses, but what you'd see in psychology, right? American Psychological Association and many other fields use it. But they cite the year right up front, right? Whereas in MLA, we put the year on the works cited page and that's it. So disciplines that honor APA, they really honor that year, right? They want to kind of slap the audience in the face with the year up front because they think, no, it is relevant within the context of their conversation at least. So that's important. In section number 3, which is language, you will answer the questions about both articles in that paragraph. So for instance, what are the author's tones like? How would you describe their language? So is it concise? Is it verbose? Is it full of jargon? And who is the audience based on the language choices? And how do you know? You would again end that paragraph by exploring the similarities and differences in language and what grander conclusions can be come to, right? Or how you can kind of characterize those areas of study based on language. In conjunction with that, the next section right before your very last section is called reference. And this is where you essentially look at 2 different fields of study and you consider, right, what reference styles are they using? And ask yourself, you know, why and how, in what way is that strategic? Okay, so you might think about looking at 2 articles, you know, when you're kind of in the beginning stages of this, thinking about, well, I know that I have to have 2 articles. They have to be from different fields of study, but I know that I'm not looking at their arguments per se. I should be looking at if I can compare or contrast rather, the structure, the language, and the reference style between these 2 in a conversation that is cohesive and that I actually have textual support for. In reference style, of course, you're looking at, again, well, what reference style does this section most closely resemble? And then you would kind of think about the implications of those findings. And I've noted in bold, it is really important that you end each section with that, right? Trying to rationalize the author's writing and research approach from each field of study. And I did want to note as well, you are not permitted the usage of first person, I. You should not use contractions. You should use 4 direct quotes and they should be sandwiched correctly. I have made a template for this essay and you can find it on Blackboard and it is fill in the blank. So obviously, in the conclusion too, you want to make sure that you summarize the main points of the essay, but you also want to answer the so what. Okay, so thinking about so what, why does it matter? If there are any questions, as always, you can let me know. Last thing I wanted to note, though, is make sure that you do mention both authors equally in each paragraph. right? You want to mention both authors equally in each paragraph. And throughout the guidelines for Project 2, I've also done my best to give you sort of what I'd call like a guesstimate of how much space you need for each section. So if you want to play with that, feel free to and conversate with me about it, but you should be within that range, right? I enjoy working with all of you, so I look forward to seeing what it is you produce. Thank you so much for watching. And again, if you've got questions, let me know. Thanks.